Okay, we should be good.
Great. Okay, I am calling to order the regular board meeting for Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021. And our first order of business is to call the roll.
Director Bragman,
Here.
Director Gibson,
Here.
Director Schmidt,
Here.
Vice President Russell,
Here.
and President Kohler.
Here. I'm now looking for a motion to adopt the agenda.
Move approval of the agenda.
Second.
Do we have any board comment on the agenda?
There are none.
Seeing none, I'm sorry? Okay,
There are none.
any public comment on the agenda?
Oh, yes, there is one. Mr. Ed Jamison. Go ahead, Mr. Jamison.
Hi, I'm sorry, I do not have a comment on the agenda.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, then we are going to vote on the motion to adopt the agenda.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Vice President Russell,
Aye.
and President Kohler.
Aye. Now is the time for public comment on any items that are not on the agenda. If your comment is agendized, we're going to ask that you hold it till then. But if you have a comment on an item that is not on the agenda, now is the time. Terry?
We have 4 public comments right now. Laura Ethel, then Baron Hamill, please. Ms. Ethel.
Thank you. Today, the Board of Supervisors decided to go back to in-person meetings, but they have retained the ability for anyone to participate in the Board of Supervisors meeting by Zoom. That means for people like me who are disabled, we can participate in a Board of Supervisors meeting regardless of our disability and in a way that wasn't possible prior to the pandemic. I would appreciate it if this board would permit access to its meetings, regardless of the overall format, whether we continue to have virtual meetings or go back to in-person meetings or have hybrid meetings, that disabled people be afforded the opportunity to participate the way the Board of Supervisors has arranged for their meetings to be done. That didn't happen with the board retreat. You did not permit people who couldn't come to the meeting in person to participate in that meeting. In that respect, you were discriminating against people who are disabled, and I would appreciate it if you would correct that problem going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ethel. Ms. Hamill.
In May, when I attended my first board meeting, Director Russell talked about how his household of 2 adults uses approximately 35 gallons of water a day. I thought to myself, surely they're taking showers at their club, sending the laundry out to be done, and eating at restaurants every night to achieve this. Now that I've become a water conservation advocate and with the Flume device to track my household's water use, I can say that in October, our use is down 79% compared to last year. And I wasn't extravagant with water back then. Conserving isn't difficult. For example, doing laundry less often has not been a hardship for me, I assure you. Kidding aside, it just takes being mindful, which perhaps was Director Russell's point. How we as a community deal with the drought going forward will be the challenge. I believe in hoping for the best and simultaneously planning for the worst. This includes having several strategies, including an even greater level of conservation. We can do this by continuing to raise the collective consciousness of the district's customers. But it will take a community committed to making this kind of difference for the long term. How this will be done is yet to be determined, but it's possible. After all, last week we finally achieved the elusive 40% water conservation goal. Now we just have to maintain it despite the gift of last week's deluge. Thanks to everyone for their diligence and hard work. It's not in vain.
Thank you. The next two speakers, Rick Adler and then Ed Jamison, please. Mr. Adler.
Yes, I thank you very much. I want to suggest that you begin a whole new advertising campaign to promote water saving, because with this current rain, a lot of the people that are, casual water savers are probably going to not bother anymore. And about half of the people, my guess, is don't even consider it, never even considered it. They don't really know who you are. They just know that they turn on the water and always cold, clean, pure water comes out. It's been that way all their lives and probably be that way forever. They don't even think about it. So you need a whole new campaign, something like rain at last. We need 10 times more rain, and we need you to conserve 10 times more just to get back to normal. Because, very few of the general population is like the people that call in to these board meetings. They're really red hot conservationists like I am, and like you are, and like the lady that just called. So anyway, I think you need a whole new campaign to get the people to keep conserving despite the rain. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Jamison, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'd like to briefly comment on two things. First, I'd like to apologize to the district staff for an incorrect comment I made at the last board meeting when I complained that 2 slides were omitted from the district's subsequent posting of slides from the Las Vegas Conservation Manager's presentation at the October 15th board retreat. There was no Zoom video of that meeting, and I misremembered this, but a couple of days later, I learned that the Coalition of Sensible Taxpayers, or COST, had posted a video of the meeting, and it showed that there was no slide about the Las Vegas's discontinuing the $75 washing machine rebate program, and that it was actually an oral comment made by the presenter in the Q&A session that followed. And the 2 pie charts that I remembered seeing were actually, I believe, in Ms. Pollard's presentation. So the district staff got it right, and I got it wrong on both counts, and I'd like to apologize for that. The other item I'd like to comment on is the outstanding webinars the district staff held the week before last and the week before that. District staff gave up 2 hours of their time both evenings to show their normal excellent presentations, but also made themselves available to answer questions from us water users, giving impressively concise and knowledgeable answers to our queries. I'd just like to say a big thank you and well done to the staff. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Jamison. The next 2 speakers, Mimi Willard and then Carol Posen, please. Ms. Willard.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm asking tonight if the board or the general manager could comment on the status of the water contract for that is expected to, or has been suggested, would be coming from the Central Valley and ultimately getting to us through the Intertie that is moving forward. And this is the 3rd meeting that I've asked about this, and I haven't gotten a reply, but I thought maybe this is because the board has been discussing this in closed session and that they are, for reasons of negotiation, haven't disclosed this. But it would be helpful if you could update us, because I have to believe that the board at least is in the loop, given that they've been approving tens of millions of dollars of spending on the Intertie to bring this water toward to us. So if you could provide some indication of what's going on and when we might see it, it would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Willard. Next, Ms. Posen, please.
Yes, I'm Carol Poseen in Greenbrae. I just hosted a neighborhood party for about 50 people to show them my laundry water to irrigation system, etc. I mentioned this earlier. I was going to do this to the board. I learned a couple of things I'd like to pass along. These are neighbors who are, probably representative of the population that you're trying to influence. They sort of understood that we had some drought going on, but they didn't understand anything specifically to motivate them to save water. And I think that what motivated them the most was the idea that when we would want to run out of water, if you could put in your ads, we are now projected to run out of water by so-and-so date, unless we get this much rain, something specific. And telling them that we would run out by next summer, and if we had another dry winter, motivated them, not something general. The other thing I learned was that they did not know the specifics of what to do to conserve water. Something as simple as, if you save water in a bucket from your shower, where do you put it in the toilet to flush it? Do I need to put it in the tank or in the bowl? They didn't understand what to do. Also, why should I, it hadn't occurred to them to put a container under their faucet in the kitchen when they're, washing their vegetables, and then using that to water their plants. So if you see this ad here, that you, the water you save saves Marin, this big ad that you do, that's wonderful in the IJ. If you added to that tip for the day, like this is what you do, put the bucket under the faucet and then you water your plants. Draw a diagram, something like that would get people to do it. They honestly didn't know what to do. They were pretty motivated to do it. Please, let's let them know the specifics. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay, let's turn to then directors and general managers announcements. Anybody?
I have none.
Yes.
Okay, I have one. Ben and I today attended a meeting with Lisa McIntosh and Doug Linney and Clifford Chan, the general manager at East Bay Mud, just as a check-in on where things stand with our examination of the Intertie, and also the primary purpose of the meeting was to really hear from them about their interests and concerns. And I don't want to take up too much time here, but I do want to touch on three main issues that were discussed. The first is that I provided my assurance as a board member of my view, not speaking for the entire board, but indicating that this is the conversation we're having, that the Intertie is intended to be employed to address health and human safety needs. It's not intended to water lawns and medians and maintain some sort of extravagant marine lifestyle. In this regard, I shared that the board had discussed the concept and was continuing to discuss the concept of guardrails around the use of the Intertie, should it be built, when it would be used, and for what purposes. Second, we also talked a bit about misinformation circulating in the press and on social media that Marin is not serious about water conservation. We outlined the extensive programs we have, rebates, et cetera, and assured them otherwise, that we were fully committed as a board and as staff and management to a permanent demand reduction. And finally, we discussed their concerns about construction and related impacts to residents and businesses in Richmond. And again, Ben and I assured them that we were going to be working with the city government and with residents to ensure that those impacts would be fully mitigated. So Ben, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I think President Kohler, you covered it well. Thank you.
Great. Okay, that brings us to our next item, which is the consent calendar. I'm looking for a motion.
Move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Do we have any public comment on the consent calendar, Terry?
There are none.
Great, then we're looking for a roll call.
Director Bregman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Vice President Russell.
Aye.
And President Kohler.
Aye. Okay, that brings us to the regular calendar, incredibly 4 minutes ahead of schedule. Item 4 is authorization of the general manager to finalize and execute the Castania Pump Station Transfer Agreement with Sonoma County Water Agency, and going on from there.
Thank you, directors. Good evening. Crystal Yesman, Director of Engineering. I'm going to put this one together and then pass it on to a new face on the panel tonight, Mark Cazaret. He's our new engineering manager for construction. And since he got hired onto the district, he's been working diligently on this one project. So a little history on how we got to this point this evening. As you know, in April, we declared a drought emergency and instituted mandatory conservation measures. In May, we executed a contract with Corollo Engineering to look at rehabilitation of Castania Pump Station, which would allow us to bring in more water from Sonoma County and help offset some of the shortages that we're seeing in our lakes. So in June, we knew that Mike Bond, our Director of Engineering, would be retiring shortly. So I had a lateral transfer from Facilities and Watershed over to Director of Engineering. And Mike Bond took on primary responsibility for negotiating transfer agreements and design for rehabilitating Castania Pump Station. And up until his retirement sometime in September, that's what he was doing. And I just want to thank him for all of his efforts and also the work that everybody put in to get to where we are today. So with that, a little bit of background on this pump station itself. It was built in 1977 to help get imported water from Russian River down here. And then we actually built it, the Marin Water did, and we owned it and operated it for about 22 years until 1999. At that time, we transferred ownership over to Sonoma County Water Agency for $1, and then they managed to operate it for the next 15 years. And at that point, there was a project to upsize. Caltrans was doing the Narrows project, and there was a project by North Marin to upsize the pipeline, which would allow us to take Castania out of service because it would allow for a larger gravity flow. And so, but now that we find ourselves in this drought condition, we realize that we need to get Castania back in service in order to bring additional water down to meet our contractual allotments, especially if we're both pulling, if both us and North Marin are pulling our maximum contractual allotments. So with that, design is complete, but before we get into the award of contract and that matter, I just want to give your attention to the first board action on the staff report, which is the board approval to execute the transfer agreement, where we will again own Castania Pump Station. It'll come back to us from Sonoma County Water Agency, but that agreement's a little bit more complex than that. There's also entails some easements where we give easement to Sonoma County for their telemetry on the site. Also, there's easements for North Marin's telemetry and their pipelines and valves that run through the site. There's a little triangle piece of property that's still owned by Caltrans, and Sonoma will execute a quit claim deed to transfer that piece of pipe that runs through that triangle from themselves to North Marin for their easement and ownership of that piece of pipe, following Caltrans's execution of the transfer, which has taken them at least 10 years, and they haven't quite done it yet. But it's written into the agreement that once Caltrans does execute that little triangle piece, that those easements will be worked out. I also want to point out that there's a second attachment that's a memorandum of understanding between 4 parties. It's North Marin Water District, ourselves, Petaluma, and Sonoma County Water Agency. That memorandum of understanding entails how we would operate the pump station to make sure that Petaluma's interests and water pressures are maintained upstream of the pump station, and other retailers on Sonoma County's Petaluma Aqueduct. There's a tank upstream called Castania Tank, and it talks about at what tank level will shut down the Castania pump station and when they will run their Eli booster station that feeds Castania Tank. So that's also in there. And then There's a third agreement that we're going to be coming back to you for approval. It's called the interconnection agreement between Marin and North Marin Water District. That agreement's a little bit more complicated. It was executed back in 1993, and it not only includes the operation of the North Marin Aqueduct, but also has a section in that agreement in regards to our releases from Cat Lake, and when we can provide additional supply at Lagunitas Creek so that they can operate their wells downstream. So it's a little bit more complicated of an agreement. We're going to bring that back once we work out the details of how we will operate the Castania pump station so that North Marin and Marin Water maintain efficient operations. So with that, any questions about?
Can I just, Crystal, that was a lot. I just want to unpack it just to make sure that everybody on the board and the public understand exactly what we're doing here. So looking at the packet, I think I just want to make sure I'm understanding this. There's really three things you're asking us to do tonight. There's first, authorizing the general manager to execute the Castania Bump transfer agreement with Sonoma and North Marin. There's second, authorizing a resolution invoking our emergency contracting powers to go forward with the contract to Gelati, to Majoria and Gelati. And third, we're authorizing the general manager broadly to execute all contracts necessary to rehabilitate the pump station.
Right, and those contracts, when we say those contracts, we're talking specifically about contracts associated with construction only. So we're not talking about the interconnection agreement, which we will come back to the board with that at a later time.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. I just want to make sure, but those are the three things.
That's correct.
That we're doing tonight. Okay, so those are all action items. I just wanted that to be super clear for the board. And I guess we'll talk later about the order in which you want us to approve those and if that's one vote or three separate votes. But anyway, for the board, I just wanted to really, like I say, unpack that there's three separate actions here.
Correct. And so let me go ahead, Ben.
I just wanted to briefly add that this project is even more timely than we anticipated. You're going to be hearing from Paul later on the drought update presentation, where we are on winter water. And we've been working on this, as we've talked to you about, for a few months. We've had a really nice breakthrough and it's moving forward. So essentially, the quicker we get Castania in operation, the more we'll be able to benefit from this winter water project, assuming it continues, and all indications are that it's favorable for us to move this forward and benefit as much as we can from this winter water. You'll hear more about that from Paul. I don't want to go into
I have a question probably along that line. The import of this process, the project we're going on now, is not that we will have a greater right to more water from Sonoma, but rather we will have the ability to maximize what we do take, which I think has been, we normally take, we have a right to, I think, 14,000 plus acre feet. And we've been able to take about 9,000 a year. How much more, what do you anticipate? How much more will this get for us?
Yeah, so this is a significant increase. Part of what sways how much more we can get is how much is North Marin pulling at a given time. But this will address the hydraulic limitation in times of summer when we both need a lot of water, also in times of drought to maximize our allocation. And very often there's operational impacts with North Marin, and we're just unable to because their treatment plant goes down or they want to fill Stafford. So it really wipes out a whole lot of constraints that have been in front of us ever since the project that Crystal talked about, to be able to take our full contractual allocation.
Okay, so we don't have an actual acre foot that we can say, this is what we're expecting, or, you know?
Well, what we're doing now, and it's a little complicated and Paul will get into it, the release from the lake, Sonoma, is still under curtailment. We're benefiting in this project the winter water project from flows in the river that are far in excess of the beneficial use minimum flows in the stream. So we're able to pull additional that's separate from the normal allocation and the restrictions that are on that now. The amount of water we get in the near term is going to be dependent on the weather. And we just want to get this project done so we can take full advantage of this effort that's underway with Sonoma Water.
Okay.
Ben, are you comfortable as far as the MOU with what is it? There's a backup pump station and the tank levels and all that have been agreed upon?
Yeah, so
there
the MOU is still under negotiation.
Okay.
We would have brought that for information. We'll bring it back at some point to share. That's really an operational document. The bigger kind of governing document is what Crystal mentioned we're going to bring back to the board, and that's the updated Intertie agreement. So that is, the Intertie agreement is the operative document in terms of our relationship with North Marin, and it needs to be updated. That's not part of tonight, but that'll come before the board. We also have this transfer agreement that we do want to have authority to enter into. And then, of course, we have the MOU that's really going to be more of an operational document that will change based on conditions and agreements in a more adaptive management approach. But we'll definitely be sharing that with the board as well.
But just to clarify, on the winter water, that will not amend our basic agreement with Sonoma County Water Agency.
Right, that's correct. This is an innovative effort to work outside of that basic agreement. That's correct.
To bolster supply.
During times of,
Got
this
it.
historic drought.
Okay,
Got it.
good. All right, so with that, we still have a bit more to present, and I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Mark, who's been working on the plans and specs and bids and awards, and he's going to take it from here. Go ahead, Mark. Uh-oh. Oh, no, your audio is not working, Mark.
Maybe, yeah.
Try your connections. Your no.
Try turning your video off.
Yeah.
Yeah, try turning your video off. Sometimes that increases your, try now.
You guys hear me now?
Not
Little
too
better.
much.
Terrible. You may have to call back in. Try that.
Yeah, I have a copy of, I can take over if need by. You want to give it another second?
Yeah.
See here. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. How am I coming through?
Now it's good.
Good.
Interesting. Okay, I apologize. Good evening, President Kohler and members of the board. As I was saying, my name is Mark Casray, Engineering Manager for Construction. And in addition to what Director Yesman brought to the board, I will be discussing the remaining recommendations, which include by resolution that the board invoke the district's emergency contracting procedures, that the board award a construction contract for Castania Pump Station to Major and Gelati of San Rafael, California, and also that the board authorize the general manager to execute all contracts necessary to rehabilitate the pump station. So Director Yesman described kind of the background of the pump station pretty well, so I won't go into those details. But as you know, due to the ongoing drought emergency, we're looking to get the pump station back online to essentially improve our operational efficiency of our existing imported water supply under our existing contractual allotment. So earlier this year, we evaluated the condition of the pump station. We performed hydraulic modeling as well as developing a basis of design. And through that analysis, we found that the most efficient solution for recommissioning the pump station was a two-phased approach. The first phase is the project before you today. It will get the pump station operating in the most expeditious manner possible. We propose to install about 220 linear feet of 30-inch welded steel pipe, which connects the pump station to the North Marin Aqueduct. In addition, we propose to refurbish one of the 2 pumps on site and perform miscellaneous mechanical and electrical improvements. Phase 2 is anticipated to replace all electrical facilities, all the major distribution panel, motor control centers, and also refurbish the 2nd pump. This will require some additional hydraulic analysis and design as well. So in May, the board approved the project and directed staff to file a CEQA notice of exemption. And last month in October, we completed the design for this phase 1. We advertised the project on October 13th, and we received 3 bids with a low bid of $537,777, and that was from Major and Gelati. And so our budget recommendation to the board is to include a contingency of $80,000, approximately 15% of this low bid, and an early completion incentive up to a maximum of $60,000 for a total recommended contract amount of $677,777. So if approved today, we anticipate the construction notice to proceed in mid-November, and a completion date near January 31st of 2022. It's important to mention, of course, that this is a significant drought emergency that exists, and it really requires immediate rehabilitation of this facility. Due to the nature of the emergency, we believe that we could not afford a 3 to 4 month delay that would come from traditional advertising procedures. So we did pursue the informal bidding and recommending the award to the low bid contractor. And with that, we do recommend to the board that you approve the resolution invoking the district's emergency contracting provisions, awarding the contract for the Castania Pump Station Rehabilitation Project to Major and Gelati, and as well authorizing the general manager to execute all contracts necessary to rehabilitate the pump station. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Mark. Let's go first to board comments on this item, or all 3 items.
I guess I'll start. So is there a drop there now, or do we have to get PG&E to bring in electricity?
No, we have full electrical power on site. It really is just a matter of doing the minor existing facility improvements and connecting the pump station to the new aqueduct of North America.
And can we buy the power from Sonoma Clean Power? Have you guys looked into that? It's the carbon free.
Yes, well, good idea. We'll definitely look into that once we get transfer of ownership.
Okay. And so what's the expected construction time, Mark?
Yeah, so we anticipate notice to proceed hopefully mid to late November. We're anticipating a 90 calendar day construction window, not including the incentive, which would put completion of the project at about the end of January. We're estimating January 31st. It is important to note, though, that we included an early completion incentive into the contract, which essentially provides $2,000 per calendar day to the contractor. Each day they complete the project before January 31st. So theoretically, they could actually complete the project by the beginning of January and would be entitled at that point to a $60,000 incentive for that.
Nice. Good idea. Thanks.
Other board comments on this item? Okay, Terry, do we have public comments on this item?
Yes, we have 2 public comments. The first person, Karen Horstmeyer and Roger Roberts. Go ahead, Miss Karen.
Hi, I don't think that I meant to raise my hand, so I apologize.
Oh,
I must
No
have hit
problem.
that. Thank you.
It happens all the time.
Okay, sorry.
No worries. Roger?
Mr. Roberts?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the Castania Tank and its capacity to store water, and how much capacity does that provide under the various conditions in terms of levels of capacity utilization, the 38-foot standard, et cetera. And what does that mean in terms of ability to deliver water? And then following on to that question is, would it make sense to increase the size of that tank in order to have greater flexibility? So that's a two-part question, and I would be interested in what you think of that situation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Should I answer that? Yes, President Kohler. So yeah, the tank is actually owned by Sonoma County Water Agency, and it's keeps pressure on the Petaluma Aqueduct. In terms of the capacity, I bet Paul knows the answer to that, how big that tank is. Paul?
Yeah, the tank's 12 million gallons. And you'll probably never hear an operations person asking for less water storage, but it's a decent size given, it's fed by the Eli booster station, which has I think about a 32 million gallon a day capacity to pump water.
So at the end of the day, Ben, this is going to pump water into the gravity-fed pipeline to Marin?
This is going to, pump into the North Marin Aqueduct and then go to, we do a little treatment, but essentially the water we get from Sonoma is potable water, and it goes directly into our system. We do a chemical treatment to it. When we increase supply from Sonoma through this pump station for winter water, whatever purpose, if that, we balance our demand by turning up or down our treatment plants. So we, in times of drought, we just want to maximize what we get, and that'll feed our system directly.
So are we internally, do we have any internal constraints once it gets to our system as far as distribution?
Oh, that's a good question. The Ignacio pump station where we add a little bit more chlorine is, from what I've heard from Gary Anderson, one of our acting operations director, it's about 16 million gallons per day capacity. And our contractual allotment is a little over 12 million gallons per day. So currently, we have no restrictions within our system to take our contractual allotment.
Okay.
It doesn't mean it's easy for operation. So for example, during winter water, because we're going to be taking it kind of by definition in the winter during the wet season, we may maybe turn off one or even both, depending how it goes of our treatment plants. That's something Paul is still working out. I don't know, Paul, if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, just a clarifying comment. Crystal is right that the capacity at Ignacio is about 16 million gallons per day, but there are some constraints within our system beyond that would be really helpful to have those fixed. And we know what those are, and we know what the fix is there.
Do you have an estimated cost?
Yeah, it's about, it could be quite costly. It might be on the order of, 10 million.
Okay.
It's pipe. We need to upsize some pipe. There's several thousand feet of pipe that we'd need to upsize around the San Quentin pump station area.
Okay. Good to know. Thanks.
Okay. Any other board comments on this item? Any other public comments on this item? Then I'm looking for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
And there are no public comments.
Okay, then we're looking for a roll call vote.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Vice President Russell,
Aye.
and President Kohler.
Aye. Okay, that brings us to the drought update.
Good evening, Board of Directors. I'm going to bring up my screen. Okay. Good evening, Board of Directors. Lucy Croy, Water Quality Manager. Tonight we have a drought update presentation. Tonight we'll go through an update on rainfall and water supply. Carrie Pollard, our water efficiency manager, will touch on drought activities and conservation. And then Paul Sellier, our operations director, will give an update on the emergency Intertie project. So starting off with rainfall and water supply, this is probably the earliest we've started to really show rainfall going into October. And, looking at October, we've had just over 18 inches of rain, as you all are probably well aware of. And that's just about the wettest we've seen. Looking back, 1890 was the last time that we saw more rain, so 130 years. And 10 and a half inches of that happened in that one 24-hour period of the atmospheric river. So this really helped with dampening our watershed and decreasing the overall fire risk, and then also producing a bit of runoff into our reservoirs for the first time in quite a few months. So in our reservoirs, we also saw a boost in overall storage, going from just around 32% of total capacity in mid-October to then jumping up to a little above 50% just as the beginning of going into November. That's about 41,000 acre feet. And, across the state, many of the drought managers are saying that, this wasn't necessarily a drought buster. And, it looks to be just about the same for us as well. And that's really reflective of being, lower than our average at this point, this darker line right here, and also lower than where we were last year. So it definitely helped getting us, farther up in storage, but, still have a bit to go. And then looking ahead at projected reservoir storage, we updated the projections incorporating now this boost in reservoir storage, as you see, up to 41,000 acre feet. And then also updated, with just 20%, using the 20% conservation savings that we're seeing pretty stably over time now. So, and then also what we've incorporated into this projection this month is the recently approved temporary urgency change petition for Lagunitas Creek that has gone into effect as of the beginning of November. And so that increases our overall storage for about 2,000 acre feet over the period through May or so. And then looking north, a little update on Sonoma Water as well. They also saw quite an increase in their storage as well, boosting both Lake Sonoma and Lake Mendocino. And what that means for the district really is that, looking ahead towards January, we no longer expect to have an additional curtailment. So, we've had a curtailment of 20% since July, and we're expecting to go up to a 30% curtailment as Lake Sonoma dropped. But with this early rain in October, we no longer anticipate kind of that curtailment jumping up. And then bringing our total reservoir storage into perspective, looking back over the past few decades, as I mentioned, we're still quite a bit below average and kind of at a historical low. Sorry, and it does seem a little bit reminiscent of the 80s. You can see over here on the left side. So the storage that we had going into November, the storage that we had at that time period from the late 80s, early 90s drought. So that drought we don't often talk about as frequently as the drought of the 1970s, which is our drought of record and a more severe drought over a 2-year period. But the drought of the late 1980s, early 1990s was a much more extended drought, and perhaps in part because we did make some investments in water supply with adding Suluhuli to our reservoir storage, as well as increasing Kent. And so what we saw over this 5 or 6 year drought period was, it wasn't a severe, but quite an extended drought. And it had quite an impact on the customers, riding this wave of uncertainty with respect to the drought. So moving between a few different curtailments during that period and really not knowing what the next wet winter months were going to bring and what the decisions had to be at the time. And then bringing it back to the current drought, as we've spoken, I think already about in this meeting, we did see a 40% weekly reduction last week. And that's largely due to the rain that we saw and also the customer efforts that we've seen kind of bringing it all together over the past few months. So with that early rain, and then also, in comparison to our baseline, we did see 40%. So it's exciting. And we hope to see that trend continue kind of through the next few months. And since May 1st, we've seen about a 22% conservation savings over that period. So continuing to see that trend and make sure that our customers turn off their irrigations as we get into these colder and wetter months. So at this point, I'm going to hand off to Carrie Pollard, our Water Efficiency Manager.
Thank you, Lucy. Carrie Pollard, Water Efficiency Manager. Good evening, board, members of the public. So I have a couple of slides here. You want to advance, Lucy? Thank you. All right, so we're going to start with drought program participation for the month of October, which just wrapped up, right? We had our highest level of participation in our turf program at over 120,000 square feet removed last year. We continue to see fairly steady around 100,000 a month, which is incredibly impressive. It really goes to show that the $3 per square foot offering continues to motivate our customers to take action. And I was anticipating in the shoulder months to actually see a decline, so it'll be interesting to look forward into the next couple of months to see if we can maintain this trend of high level of participation. Flume devices have slightly tapered off, and I have some outreach that I'll mention in a moment on how we're going to address that. Clothes washers also continue to be fairly level. Rain barrels, we're really hoping, we continue to hope to see an uptick in rain barrel participation in our rebate program at 50 cents a square foot, 50 cents a gallon up to $1,000, recognizing, that, this rain that we're getting, it's a really great opportunity for our customers to capture that water, recognizing that we don't know when these storms are going to stop, and having that on-site storage is important. And then the rest of the programs listed there as well. Next slide. A couple other items. I did mention that the downtick in Flume participation, and so we've worked with Flume. They're going to start or offer a Black Friday, Cyber Monday promotion. They'll offer $20 off the list price, and so the customer will end up paying $30 after installation, and it's an amazingly good deal. So we'll be promoting that. Flume will be promoting it as well, and we'll be updating our website to notify our customers now so they can get ready for that deal that's coming. The Water Smart grant, we did apply for a $1.14 million program as part of the regional grant application as part of the Sonoma Marin Saving Water Partnership. It is primarily for turf removal and replacement. There does require a 50% match. It was really exciting that this is a $2 million grant is the max you can actually request. And working through the region, we were quite happy and pleased to see that we were able to actually put in for the majority of that funding. So if we are awarded, of course, we will let the board know. There's a maximum flexibility with these funds, which is great, meaning that we can use them for turf that's already been removed through our programs as part of drought response, or we could use it for additional turf programs that we want to look at moving forward. So more to come on that. There was a gray water webinar on the 27th. We had 51 registered attendees. Unfortunately, only about 50% showed up. We had 24 attend, but it resulted in 7 kits being incentivized. So when you look at kind of that breakdown, that definitely looks like success to me. The more kits we can get out there, the better. And I think we're starting to see some more movement around gray water. as well. Next slide. Communications update. Our active communications managers on vacation, so I have this slide as well. We're developing a district-wide mailer that will focus on the water use limits, the irrigation restrictions, and also on pool filling, the new pool filling prohibition that will go out to all of our, not only our customers, but everyone within the district service area to increase awareness around these water use limits and winter prohibitions. ENUS went out to 22,000 recipients with a very high open rate, which we were quite pleased with. The Water Watch page continues to be utilized quite a bit, 42,000 visits in just the last 2 weeks. I think it's clear that our customers are going there to find information on rainfall and water supply and other pertinent information around drought, and we find that I think that's very successful. And finally, recognizing what Lucy already mentioned, the 40% reduction in water use that we have had this 40% call to action since April, and it's great to see that we finally hit it, recognizing that the impact of irrigation and how turning off irrigation controllers and shutting down irrigation can actually really is what we're going to need to see happen to be able to achieve that 40% reduction. And so we look forward to the additional coming months, hopefully being able to maintain that level, recognizing we are in the shoulder months. So generally folks would be irrigating at this time and they're not. And so, we'll take all the savings we can get. And so with that, I will turn it over to Paul Cellier, our Director of Operations.
Yep, thanks, Carrie. Good evening. Paul Cellier, Operations Director. Just a brief update on the emergency intertie this evening. The engineering design is progressing as they're getting into the details of things like pipe hangers and expansion joints and other engineering details. Our focus internally is on permitting and outreach, and we're turning to the 2 cities at either end of the bridge, City of San Rafael, and of course, City of Richmond, where we're making some intense outreach efforts to work with the ad hoc committee that the Mayor of Richmond is setting up. And that will include the 3 neighborhood groups, the members of the bicycle policy advocates for different bicycle groups. And we're reaching out separately to that bicycle community, including the Marin County Bicycle Coalition. And I've already had a couple of meetings with those folks. So those efforts are intensifying across sort of a broad range of stakeholders, including Chevron and a number of the transportation authorities, including the Transportation Authority of Marin, Contra Costa Transportation Authority, and then the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and the Bay Area Toll Authority, as well as, of course, Caltrans, who are working sort of in partnership with us on this project. The next slide. I should mention, though, on the previous slide, I skipped over webinar number 3, which we'll be holding. I'm not sure we have a date quite set for it yet, but maybe toward middle end of October. And its focus will be entirely on the emergency intertie project. And we'll be sort of advertising that quite broadly again. Next slide. Thanks, Lisa. President Kohler mentioned this at the top of the meeting. These are sort of just a very light introduction to the sort of notion of guardrails and some thoughts on considerations of how we might want to think about operating the intertie. And just starting with an overall objective, which I think, broadly speaking, is to prevent a water shortage emergency from occurring. And then some principles for us to think about that we would simply maximize all of our local supplies before we would entertain using the intertie. And of course, the water sources that we would choose to go after, to purchase, would be only water that would be otherwise consumptively used. And all of this would be based, of course, on a commitment to conservation, a defined program that's going to identify long-term savings for sustainable demand management. So that's sort of just a very gentle introduction into sort of thoughts and thinking about how we might think about using the intertie. Next slide. One of those local supplies that we could talk about maximizing would be our winter water. And so a quick update on that, of course, just a refresher for those who may not be familiar. The winter water is this notion of excess stream flow in the Russian River between the months of October and May. And it's excess because it's above the stream flow requirements. And Sonoma has been doing some analysis on this, sort of represented in the graph on the right here, that shows in the wetter portion of the chart that there may be up to 6,000 acre feet above our sort of baseline take of 5,300 acre feet that might be available for us. Of course, in drier conditions, that amount shrinks. Fortunately, we've just experienced the wettest October on record. And those recent storms have increased the stream flow to the point where it's above the stream flow requirements. And the regulators have provided Sonoma relief from their temporary urgency change petition, which was really fixed on storage in Lake Sonoma. So if we're drawing water from the river, we're not really affecting storage in Lake Sonoma because it's not being released. It's simply natural flows in the river from the rainfall. So what that means for us in this current setup is our flow had been curtailed to 5 MGD. And because of the winter water sort of allowance, we can move by this Friday. We'll be adjusting our operations to allow us to move to almost double that to 9 MGD. And then we'll be working out different ways of even going higher than that in terms of taking this water. How long will this flow be available to us really is sort of dependent on the flow in the river. We think it seems like it should be available through the month of November. And that's what we're planning at the moment. So potentially a significant amount of water. Of course, remembering that 30 days or 20 days of an extra 4 MGD, again, it's not a drought buster for us. It's just we've got to work to really maximize every source of water that we can. And that's what this represents. So next slide, Lucy.
Paul,
yeah.
Can you go back to that slide? I think that table, that blue square on the bottom is important. I'm assuming what you're trying to show is 5 MGD. It takes an entire year at 5 MGD to get 5.6 thousand acre feet.
Right.
And similarly, increasing it to 9 MGD, you get that benefit if you're able to do it for a full year. So a month would be, right, approximately 10 or a little less % of that.
Right. Yeah. Thanks. So the next steps then, of course, we continue to refine our outreach efforts and our conservation programs. We're going to continue, as we just looked at, with winter water operational and pursuing water supply projects so that they remain viable options for the district. And of course, we'll be coming back to the board with regular reporting at board meetings, particularly with a view to establishing conservation goals. And that concludes the drought update.
Sorry. Okay, so let's go first to board comment and then we'll go to public comment. This is an information item.
I have just a quick question for Carrie. And that is, what's the status of our recycle water stations? I assume they're closed now because with the rain. Will they be open again?
I defer that to Lucy, actually.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So we were open 2 days last week and saw quite a decrease in the numbers out there. And we've kind of been monitoring what days are rain or not and posting that on our website. So we're still kind of seeing how much demand there is and are adjusting at this point.
Okay, so we're not certain we'll be opening them at all. I mean,
We've been open about half the time right now, depending on if it's fully raining during the day.
okay.
So.
I've just got a couple questions. Paul, with the constraints you kind of touched on during the last item, are we able to take 9 million gallons a day without any, constraint or backup?
Yes, so 9 million is about where our comfort level is in terms of being able, in the winter time, in terms of being able to kind of shoehorn the water into the system. Because our total demand has only been 14 and a half for the whole system. So it's just sort of, we have to spread that water out, if you think of it that way, across the system. And I said 10 million, but there are maybe smaller projects that we could do that would incrementally fix that. And, come to mind the sort of bottleneck around San Quentin. Maybe that's, $2 or $3 million, not the full 10, which would include a pump station rehab and, another pump station elsewhere in our system that would need to be upsized and changed. So there are things that we could do sort of incrementally that would make it easier. So we are going to try to move from 9 to slightly higher, but that may require us to shut down one of the treatment plants, and we're working through a plan to develop that and see how much more we can actually get.
Yeah. And then just a curiosity, we are not getting the water from Lake Sonoma, right? We're getting it from the caissons on the river.
Correct.
Okay. So, and apparently they can grab more water from those facilities than we are presently getting.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the demands, all of the demands for the different contractors at this time of year is probably less than their capacity, because they obviously supply us in the summertime when demand's much higher. So I think the extra flow that's in the river right now, we could probably get more water out of it.
Okay.
Okay, other board comments on the drought update? All right, Terry, do we have any public
I had
comments?
one other comment.
Oh, sorry. I didn't realize you weren't done.
Oops. Can I just say one other thing? Just as far as the drought being over, if you look at our water supply now, we're about 10,000 acre feet less than we were last year. So for sure, the drought is not over. Just you can see it in that. To me, that number really says it all. So we cannot be like forgetting about what we've just gone through, because we're not done.
Yeah, I really concur with that. I think the numbers are clear. I just want to see if there's any other board comment before we go to public comment on this item. Okay, Terry, public comment?
Yes, there are 3. The first 2, Steve Isaacs, then Roger Roberts, please. Mr. Isaacs?
Yes, regarding the Russian River, what are our rights? How much can we draw from the Russian River? And is there a limitation on that?
And do you want to take that, or do you want to delegate that?
Oh, why don't you?
Yeah. So just to be careful of our terminology here, we have a contract for supply of water with Sonoma County Water Agency as opposed to water rights. But the volume I think that you're after is 14,300 acre feet of contractual rights
Annually.
Per year.
Per year, yeah.
And what would that amount to on a daily basis? Because you were using figures on a daily gallons per day.
On a daily basis, that's about 12.5 million gallons a day.
12.5 million gallons. Very good. Thank you for the information. Appreciate it.
But just to be clear, I think, Paul, you may want to add, we rarely are able to take the full 14,000 because of these technical limitations. So I just want to be sure that the commenter understands that we have not historically taken up to that. That's a maximum.
We can never take it. We don't have the
Physically.
hydraulic capacity without
Yeah.
the pump
Right.
station.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right.
Mr. Roberts?
Next.
Oh, am I on?
Yes,
You're
sir.
on. We can hear you, Roger.
Okay. Point Richmond was not mentioned tonight. You talk about meetings with Richmond, but you don't mention Point Richmond. Point Richmond is a separate community. And does that mean you're moving everything north of 580?
Ben, do you want to address that?
When we speak about Richmond, we're talking about the city of Richmond. That does include Point Richmond. And the project does extend beyond Point Richmond. So we have a broad stakeholder outreach and coordination effort broadly through the city of Richmond that certainly includes Point Richmond.
But you haven't made any decisions to move facilities to the north side of 580 in response to their concerns?
We are currently evaluating a number of ways to mitigate their concerns, including the potential for alternative sites for our temporary pump station.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next two speakers, Paul Duder, then Rick Adler, please. Mr. Duder.
Hi, I was just curious about whether or not we have information from Flume indicating that household outdoor use has gone down since the atmospheric river. Can we tell if people have turned off their irrigation systems?
Would you like me to take that question?
Of course.
Yes. We in a few months we get the data from Flume every quarter, so we can't go back and look, last week at what happened. But I think we'll be able to in a few months we'll be able to look back at the trends, and it'll be very telling to see the influence of the precipitation on irrigation. So today we cannot, but down the road we will be able to.
Should we?
What about the 2,800 homes in Tiburon, Carrie?
For that have AMI, that Director Russell's referring to are the homes that have AMI. So AMI doesn't disaggregate use in the same way that Flume does. So with enough digging, we probably could be able to take a look and see if we see some trends in those AMI customers. We have not taken a look at that yet, but could warrant a task worth pursuing.
Should we be telling people to turn their irrigation systems off?
We're trying.
That's a good comment. And yes, our messaging right now is very focused to, if you haven't turned your irrigation off, turn it off and keep it off through the winter is really going to be the emphasis of our communication.
And one of the next agenda issues.
Right.
Coming up tonight.
Thank you. The next two speakers, Rick Adler, then Mimi Willard, please. Go ahead, Mr. Adler.
Yes, thank you. I once again wanted to suggest that you begin a new winter weather water advertising campaign that acknowledges that we've had the rain to reach the people that my guess is 25% of the people are hardcore water savers. 25% are casual water savers. They'll save the water if they remember, if it's easy. And the other half are just too old or too young or too busy, too drunk. They just don't pay any attention to it at all. But to catch those 25% casual water savers who have not had the opportunity to see these charts and realize that we really need about another 10 of these water storms to get back to normal. They just look out and see it's wet and they just casually don't bother to save the water anymore. So to reach out to those people, you need a new winter advertising campaign to explain that to them. And one note, I noticed that many of my new neighbors that are in these newly refurbished McMansions that is sprouted up everywhere, they have gardeners, and they have they never get out and go on their green lawns. I don't think they even know where their water systems are and how to turn it off, how to turn off their automatic irrigation. It would never occur to them. I noticed they come and go, but they never spend any time gardening or in their lawns. And somehow you got to reach those folks, because they don't have a clue as to how to turn it off, or that they even should. So I know it's a difficult proposition, and hopefully you can come up with some clever ways to convince these people to keep saving water, because we're still in a drought. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Adler. Ms. Willard?
Yes. How does the flume data tell you whether the use of water is indoors or outdoors? And does that tell you, does that give you the information by specific customer?
So part of Flume's proprietary software is that they disaggregate water use into indoor versus outdoor. And when that data is provided to the district, it's randomized, so we don't have it linked to any particular customer.
Good.
Okay, Terry, any other public comments on this item?
Yeah, Baron Hamill, and then I think Roger Roberts has his hand up again. But I'm going to start with Baron Hamill. Go ahead, Ms. Hamill. Ms. Hamill?
Thank you. I just have a quick comment. This morning I saw an online ad for a $16 million house for sale in Ross. There were drone photographs that were taken obviously a month or so ago that shows 1.5 acre lawn that leads to a swimming pool. My head was about to explode when I saw that lawn picture, because I knew that they were irrigating when irrigation mandates were in place, that we weren't allowed to irrigate. How do you stop homeowners, or how do you stop a property from having lawns irrigated when no one is present? And this isn't the only house. I've seen several ads for similar properties in Kentfield and Ross, etc. These huge expanses of lawn that are lush and green, and they've gone on the market recently, and those photographs had to have been taken in September and early October.
Okay. And last speaker, 8800. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Great. Nancy Okada. I was wondering, given the situation with the recent rainstorms and stuff, if you could share with us who you're getting the water from in the Central Valley and at what price you're going to buy it from them for, because given the rain, maybe it's gone down in price. So could you share that information? Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers. Can you hear me?
All right, I think something happened to my sound there for a second.
Oh,
Sorry
okay.
about that. Okay, do we have any other public comment on this item?
There are none.
Okay, That's going to bring us to item 6, the BCDC permit for the emergency intertie project.
Yeah, good evening. Paul Silly, Operations Director again. Briefly, so BCDC was formed in, I think, established in 1965 as a temporary agency, state agency under the McAteer-Petrus Act, right? And so
Go Save the Bay. It was the Save the Bay ladies that made it.
Yeah,
I think it was
yeah.
1961, actually.
Pre-East Bay ladies, right? That
Right.
set that up. It was kind of cool. So long and storied history, and so today it enjoys, that reputation of sort of defender of the public trust.
Yes.
And by all accounts, has done a fantastic job in San Francisco Bay. Of course, our project, their jurisdiction is basically all of San Francisco Bay, from the far south end up to the Sacramento River out to the Golden Gate. So several bays within the bay, if you like. And segments of our project fall within their jurisdiction. And so we need to get a permit. The type of permit that we're looking at pursuing is an amendment to the Caltrans permit. They have a permit for the work on their bridge. And so it's similar work to what we're proposing. So it seems to be a good fit. It does look like our permit would fall into the category of a non-material amendment. And there are, the BCDC has this sort of menu of permit options that have different fees associated with them. So I've done my best to figure out which one will likely fall into and calculate the fee. It's basically 0.2% of the project cost for this category of non-material amendment. And at the upper range of $90 million, that presents itself as a $180,000 cost. And I would just draw the board's attention to a typo in the fiscal impact section of the report that had it called out as a 0.16%. It turns out those small numbers do matter. It's 0.2%. So tonight I'm asking the board for their approval for this permit fee for the BCDC permit for the emergency intertie project. And it's an authorization for $180,000, up to $180,000 for the permit.
Okay. Do we have board comment on this item?
Paul, and Ben, BCDC does have a social equity and environmental justice component to their licensing, and I don't know if we've taken a look at that or how that's going to kind of get mixed into this whole formula that we're working on for this project. But have you guys given any thought to how that's going to impact?
So those types of things may end up in the form of mitigations. So, if we're disrupting a trail, we need to provide a shuttle or something of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be a little bit more iterative.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to, get our application materials together, submit it, receive some of that feedback and discussion from the BCDC staff, and to identify what their specific concerns are in the specific segment areas, and then start working through that process. So we may be back to the board very likely again to talk about some of these mitigations with you. And it quite frankly, the permit fee structure could change. I mean, as you get into the discussions with BCDC, it could evolve to, a full public hearing process and a major permit, in which case, the permit fees may go up a little bit.
Yeah.
So we're sort of at a starting place with BCDC tonight.
Yeah. So you're anticipating a broader kind of look at it from BCDC, I think. Huh?
Yeah, that's fair.
Other board comments on the permit? Okay. Any public comments on this item, Terry?
There are two, Roger Roberts and former Mayor Frank Egger. Okay, Mr. Roberts.
Is it possible to suggest to BCDC uses for those funds? One use that might make sense is to help with the planning process for Highway 37, which is also within BCDC's reach. Is there an opportunity for you to suggest uses of the money?
I can answer that, President Kohler, if you'd like. Yeah, so Mr. Roberts, the fees that BCDC collect are by statute, and they are deposited directly into the state's general fund. BCDC is a state-funded agency, so every year they have a budget just like every other state department. And so their fees, while they may cover, nominally, when you add them up, they may cover some small percentage of their budget. The fees do not go to BCDC, they go to the state general fund.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Mr. Egger?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Frank Egger, representing the North Coast Rivers Alliance. Good evening, directors. The application to BCDC for the Intertie is premature. The Intertie is a project as defined by the California Environmental Quality Act. It is not exempt from CEQA. The application to BCDC is not complete as there is no environmental impact report on the project for BCDC to be able to make necessary findings as required by CEQA. Without an EIR, there's no way BCDC can determine if there are any adverse impacts. The Internet project has no certification of consistency with the Sacramento-San Joaquin Bay Delta Plan. Since the Intertie can move water in either direction, there are no maximum limits on the volume of water to be transferred from the Central Valley to Marin via the Intertie, nor the maximum amount of water from the Rush and Eel River complex that Marin can transfer back to East Bay Municipal Utility District, the Central Valley, or the State Water Project. Without an environmental impact report, there is no determination as to whether or not the Intertie will allow a connection to the massive development of 1,400 to 2,000 homes plus commercial development at Point Malate. San Pablo and San Francisco Bays depend on flows from the Sacramento-San Joaquin Bay Delta to flush contaminants out to the bay and to signal salmon to come on up. Will the Central Valley transfer to Marin reduce flows to the bay? Since the Intertie connects Marin to the State Water Project without environmental impact report, there is no way to determine impacts on 2 runs of Chinook salmon in the Central Valley. Without an EIR, no determination as to impacts on the Eel River Chinook that sense the Eel River water flowing out at Jenner in the Russian River, and inadvertently, Eel River Chinook make the turn up the Russian River, believing it's the Eel River. For these reasons, it is clear that without complying with CEQA and providing an EIR, both MMWD and other public agencies will not be able to make necessary findings as to the impacts on fisheries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. One more speaker, Laura Sheraton, please.
Hi.
Go ahead.
My name is Laura Cheriton. I'm the president of the Watershed Alliance of Marin, and I just want to concur with everything that Frank Egger just said. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no further speakers.
Okay, let's bring this back to the board. This is an action item. Is there a motion?
Move approval. Second.
Terry?
Oh, sorry. Director Bregman?
Aye.
Director Gibson?
Aye.
Director Schmidt?
Aye.
Vice President Russell?
Aye.
And President Kohler.
Hi. That brings us to item 7. This is an information item on streamlining board regularly scheduled meetings.
I have this item, President Kohler and board members. I would just say to start that I see this item as an ongoing conversation with the board on how we're more efficient and effective on many things, including board meetings, if we choose to. We put in the staff report just some initial thoughts that we'd like to get board feedback. Perhaps one or two of them we try as a pilot and see how it goes. Briefly reviewing them, the first one is request to fill positions. Our recommendation on that is to move past what I understand to be the starting point for that practice, which we were in a severe economic downturn in a financial situation where we had a hiring freeze. So the board at that point, and even though we're out of the hiring freeze, that practice is kind of a legacy practice that continued. The recommendation here would be, because the board authorizes the positions when you authorize the annual budget, we would not bring positions that are vacant that we're filling in kind, but we certainly would bring any position that's different from what you authorize in the budget, whether it's the salary, the nature of the position, or the like. So that's the first recommendation. The next one is thinking about our practice in public comments, and there's kind of two scenarios for items not on the agenda and items on the agenda. For the former, we're just recommending we continue the practice. It's really standard across public agencies where there's not the elected body doesn't typically get into a conversation on those items or respond to questions. They're an opportunity for the public just to provide comment to the board for your future considerations. On items on the agenda, there could be ways to streamline that process through, particularly where we have an item that we're getting a whole number of comments. We could hear all the comments and then group them together and have staff respond to the themes. We also have a suggestion for the board to consider the timing of board meetings. Understand that we do have working board members, and this is, you know, if it's something you wanted to consider, may help even if we modify it just a bit on how late it gets, where we tend to lose some public participation. We have another item combining similar items, and that's really reflected in what we've been doing that, and I think it's been working. So item 4 is a good example of that, where we bundled more than one decision in one item. And all that does is just reduce the time to bring the item, to introduce it, but it allows the full public participation on all those items. As we saw tonight, the board and the public commented on, well, maybe not tonight, but in the past, a range of the particular items. And then lastly, the consent calendar. We do have a practice of not putting anything on the consent calendar other than minutes in the GM report that haven't gone to a committee. It is a practice in many public agencies for very routine items to go. And the example we put in the memo would be the annual contract for chemicals. So the same chemicals, a modest increase perhaps due to inflation, all of that would be outlined in the staff report. And of course, the board on their own inclination or due to a public comment could always pull that item from the consent calendar. So that's what staff came up with our initial thinking, and we're interested if any of these resonate or not with the board, or if you have other ideas, any feedback would be appreciated.
Board comment on this item.
I have several. It seems to me that the bulk of these could easily be handled in the doc committee. I don't necessarily see a value in not running them through the board. Even something like the chemicals, I mean, it's a natural home for it to go to the doc meeting and then to the consent calendar. And it seems to me this could be resolved fairly easily, Ben, in my thinking anyway, by just relocating where they occur. That includes the employment ones. I think the employment ones are a good idea. It keeps the board aware of changes and keeps us in the loop.
Yeah, it actually, if I can correct your history, Ben, it didn't come, it came out of the fact that the board very much felt the need to look more closely at staff size and to get a handle on it. And that's when that was implemented. It didn't have anything to do with bad economy or hiring freeze. They wanted to contain the size of the staff, quite frankly.
I think that's right, Jack, but I also think that moment has passed. I think we're about as.
I'm not arguing that. I'm not
okay.
arguing that at all. I'm just correcting the history. I mean, yeah.
Why not put it on the consent?
That's what Larry, I think, is suggesting.
Yeah, but via the doc.
Well, or just
Well,
or a board meeting, you know.
The filling.
Well, that's what Ben's proposing.
Well, I was actually proposing not bringing them at all to the board if they were pre-authorized. I think I personally like the kind of middle ground of we just bring them to a board meeting on consent. So the board sees them. If you have any questions, we just pull it from consent.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's where it should go. You know. So, and then the other thing is starting the meetings early. You know, 6 is going to be tight for me. I would go 6:30. You know, I could handle.
How about 7?
I would go with 7. You know, 6. I, mean,
I think
7,
6 is way too early.
Okay.
And there's times when we need to have closed sessions, and I'm just not going to be. 6 is pushing it for me as it is. So if we go to a 7 o'clock meeting, that, you know,
that's fine with me.
We used to have closed session at the end of the meeting as opposed to the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah, I would say the end of the meeting is unacceptable for me. There's a limit. So I'm willing to have it on the front side. I just can't have it, you know, completely overtake my workday. So
on this, I'm hearing, but I want to make sure on this item, was there or is there consensus to try to pilot 7 p.m. for the start
I'd
of
be
the
willing to
meeting?
pilot 7.
Likewise.
Where are the rest of you guys?
Sure, 7's good.
What's the definition of pilot, and what does that mean?
We would do it until we have a problem with it. But no, I think we would want to be a real pilot. I would suggest we do it for 6 months, and we would put a specific check-in where we do come back to the board and see how it was going.
Or sooner.
It's until it crashes and burns.
And then I also had on here combining similar items. To me, that just works. You know, if we push it, we won't, but if we were, we would get the feedback. And then the consent calendar. I do hear you, Director Russell, and the reason I did intentionally put the chemical contracts because, and you know, understandably, all of our meetings have gotten packed because of the drought, but we are finding even the committees have been very stretched, and we're bumping items and getting a bit of a backlog and getting squeezed a little bit. So we would like a little flexibility, and we would call it out when we do it. But you know, of course, I want the board to be comfortable if we move in that direction a little bit.
Okay. Do you feel
So
that
you're
you've got-
thinking,
Sorry, go ahead.
excuse me. So your thinking, Ben, would be that only no new hires would be included then? Nothing that changes the FTE count?
Oh, absolutely. For the positions, I think what I'm hearing is, and the recommendation at this point would be, we would only put on consent positions that were authorized as part of the budget. So whatever number of positions were authorized, and not just also if we're recruiting, right, sometimes because of the market or needs, we change the position and often has a change in salary. We would bring those too as a regular item. So it would really just be these routine items, probably tonight. I mean, tonight I do believe we have one. So a vacancy, and I think it's just a straight vacancy anyway. We'll get to it soon enough. Yeah, meter reader and repair worker. So
Right.
that would be the sort of, if it's just a vacancy and we're filling it in kind, that would just be on the consent calendar. The only change to what we're doing now, for now. Okay. I think we got the feedback we needed.
Okay.
And to be clear, the big one is going to be piloting for, if it works for the board, for a 6-month period. We'll come back with a discussion item at that point too. And of course, if before 6 months, for whatever reason, if it's not working, we aren't putting this in stone, but that would be the plan going forward.
Okay. All right. Any other board comment on this? Do we have any? Did I already ask if we have public comment on this? I'm not sure I did.
No.
Yeah, I've not asked yet.
Okay. Public comment on this item?
Director Kohler, before we get going, I'd like to just board comment. Just you know, we have definitely heard some concern about streamlining our agenda as something that could impact public input, and I want to address that squarely in that I think that what we are talking about here is not in any way impeding public input or the chance for people to comment on what is before our agenda. I think it actually makes it more accessible by trying to set aside more time for where there is need for discussion and have our meetings not go very, very late, which I think is tough on everybody. But at the same time, if there is something that is on the consent calendar, that if there still is the opportunity for people to provide comment, just because it's been moved there doesn't change anybody's ability to comment. And I think that's an extremely important thing. I think also by starting earlier, we've heard that starting late is a challenge for people. So we're not doing this. I don't see this as being something that is meant to accommodate the board or staff, but I think is something we are intending to make it easier and better for all people to participate. And I just want to make that note, because it is extremely important that our customers are able to participate in this process and to be able to join us via Zoom and provide comment in as reasonable manner as we can make happen.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Yeah, I was actually surprised to see the negative comments coming in, because I interpreted this agenda item as set up and intended to do exactly the opposite. Get some of the clutter out of the way so we have more time to actually deal with more people with whatever comments they may have. So, yeah,
this does not limit people's ability to comment in any way beyond in a different way than we currently have, where we have asked for limits when we have large numbers of people commenting, so that it's fair for other people to comment, but it's not in any way diminishing what we have done in the past. I think we've made it more accessible.
Yeah.
I want to echo those comments that the Brown Act reinforces that obligation for the board, and of course the interest in making sure that we're allowing public comment. And I think I agree with the fact that having the process go more quickly and more smoothly simply allows us to assure that we have the sufficient amount of time to accommodate everybody's comments.
Right.
Okay. Are we ready to go to public comment on this item?
Yes, I have 3 comments so far. Mimi Willard, then Roger Roberts, please.
I think that the board's comments just now dismiss the input that you received pretty strongly from the public, which is don't change your approach to public comment. And clearly, for example, combining agenda items, let's say you combine two agenda items that you say are related, reduces the opportunity for public comment by half. Now, if there are separate votes for those two items, clearly they should be two separate items and with two separate opportunities for the public to comment. I think that the take-home message of the input that you received from the public today is that they feel that this is an inappropriate time to do anything that changes the nature of public comment in terms of whether it's directly responded to or not, whether it is summarized by an assistant board secretary, or whether it is reducing the number of times that they're able to comment is perceived to be a change at a time when a board is under scrutiny. So I think it's just the wrong time to make a change. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Willard. Mr. Roberts, please.
Question or perhaps an observation. Departmental reorganizations, would those be incorporated in a consent item, or would that be a separate item?
Well,
it would be taken off the consent calendar, Roger. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Jameson?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. The district staff does really excellent presentations, but they are so repetitive. Every 2 weeks to see the same charts takes a lot of time. And particularly, I mean, to pick one that's particularly noteworthy, I'd say, knowing that there were 5 rain barrels picked up last week or last month, I guess it is, and to be shown that twice a month is very time consuming. A slide like that could be presented once a month with just the presenter saying, are there any questions or comments on this? By the way, we got 120,000 square feet of turf removed, end of story. But to go through laboriously all of these, including the acre feet of storage, unless there's really nothing different each 2 weeks, the same approach could be taken. Here's an update of our slide. Nothing really happened noteworthy. Do you have a question or a comment? Or if something falls out of bed, or last week certainly was dramatic and it was quite interesting to everyone, of course. But to go through all of these same slides twice a month takes an inordinate amount of time. And if I were you, I would prefer not to go through all that. Thank you.
Thank you.
The only
the next
comment I'll make in response, Mr. Jameson, because I take your point, especially for those of us who show up to all these meetings, and you obviously have been, among those, but not everybody does. So I just want to point out that part of what we're doing is ensuring that that the public is informed, and not everybody comes to every meeting. But I take your point generally.
Next speaker, Mr. Minikes, please.
Good evening, board. I thought it was a good discussion. I especially agree with Monty's comments that it has to remain accessible to the community. I think it's a worthwhile pilot. Give it a shot. See what happens in real world. If you start combining items, if you see it's a problem, you can back off. Larry, you said something to that extent, until it blows up. I mean, you made fun, but you're right. Try it. Let's see. It would be really great to get these meetings just moving along. It's like a baseball game. And if it just takes so long, and if you can just get along, it really does serve the public, because people don't want to hang out here till 9:15. They're interested, they're showing up, and it becomes a disincentive if the meetings drag along too long. And with that, I will stop. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Adler.
Yes, thank you very much. I wanted to commend the board and the staff for conducting these meetings. I think you do it very well. And I know they're very long and very hard. And so I wanted to commend you and praise you for doing that and for taking all the public comments, especially mine. And I was just wondering if you say it's going past 9:30, if you can just postpone whatever's left on the agenda till the next week and have a short interim meeting between the regular ones. If you can just, it's too late. We're just gonna take these last two items and do them next Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no further speakers.
Okay. This is, oh, okay. Yeah, this was an information item, so I think we're moving on, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I just say one thing? I think Mimi's comment about combining items is something we need to listen to. I mean, that is the one thing I thought that had some legal substantive substance to it, because it would tend to limit the number of times a speaker could address a particular item on the agenda. So, combining stuff, I totally see the value of doing that, but it could tend to sort of constrain public comment if it's done too aggressively. So,
Director Bragman, if I may speak to that briefly, I think we're not talking about trying to take things that are very far apart, but rather part of a same project or same group of activities that are really, I know of no prohibition of having action items each having to be separately agendized. And in fact, if you were to have a CEQA item, for example, that would require a separate vote, you wouldn't necessarily want to separate that on the agenda. In fact, you really want them to go hand in hand. So I think that it's incumbent upon staff, all of us, to make sure that we're not abusing that we're not trying to take advantage of it. It's a process that I've seen regularly where it makes sense and the items are naturally related significantly, inherently to each other. So I don't think it's that we're trying to curtail comment. I think we're really trying to think efficiently about how we're approaching an agenda and getting things through the process. And I have seen that there's no requirement that each action item be separately agendized. Typically they are, just because they're naturally different. But in cases where they are interrelated and interdependent even, I've seen them be one agenda item.
I mean, we had that tonight, right?
Yeah, didn't we do that with item number 4?
Right. And
the one that had the three
listen,
things.
I'm not inferring, bad intent. I'm just saying it could have sort of an unintended consequence. And it needs to be done cautiously, because the Brown Act does allow comment on public comment. And if you mash too many items together, I mean, it would constrain public comment. So it's just a cautionary note.
Right.
Yes, I don't disagree with you. I just wanted, it's more of a reassurance that we look at those things and take them into consideration.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're moving on to item 8, which is an approval item. It's a resolution regarding the continuation of virtual board meetings.
That's my item tonight, and I will try to be quick, but I do have a bit of a presentation for a slide presentation, so bear with me. So this is to consider continuing to allow virtual meetings and also to consider options as we look at transitioning back to in-person meetings. So I'm going to switch things up and put the recommendation right up front to move us along. For the other reason I'm going to do that is because it is really a roadmap to the discussion as well as the recommendation. So We do have in your packet tonight the resolution to adopt, which would allow virtual board meetings to continue pursuant to AB 361. So we are proposing the board take that action. We also think it's important timing wise for the board to consider options for future board meetings, including transitioning back into in-person meetings. So we're going to look at some options, and then we'll be looking to the board to provide us some direction for the next board action on November 16th. And I think it's important to note November 16th because it really is the next time the board will need to act in order to meet the 30-day requirement of AB 361. You can switch, Terry. That'll help me make my point. Thank you. So Assembly Bill 361 was recently adopted as an urgency legislation. It does allow us to continue virtual meetings during a proclaimed state of emergency. We're still in that proclaimed state of emergency with respect to COVID-19 under certain circumstances, but it does require the board to reconsider the circumstances of the emergency every 30 days. So the last time we were here talking about this was October 5th. Terry, you can go ahead and switch slides. Thank you. The board took action on October 5th, adopted a resolution to allow continuing virtual meetings due to health risks associated with in-person meetings. That does bring us to tonight, which is necessary to reconsider that action. We're within the 30 days. However, the next 30 days would put us on December 2nd. We don't actually have another board meeting until December 14th. So we would be bringing back something November 16th to make sure that we're, one, keeping within the 30-day requirement, but two, allowing a more robust consideration of different options. Next slide. So look, just a quick look at what's going on around us, and in particular with respect to the County of Marin. There was a direction from the Director of Health and Human Services issued on September 2nd, recommending continued social distancing use of virtual meetings. The Board of Supervisors did adopt a resolution pursuant to AB 361, similar to what we did on October 5th. And then October 26th, the Director of Health and Human Services pointed back to the September 22nd guidance as still being effective. And the Board of Supervisors adopted a resolution to allow virtual meetings to continue. However, things have changing quickly. November 2nd, that was this morning, the Board of Supervisors did hold their meeting via hybrid mask, but they did move to hybrid meetings. Next slide.
I think you might consider dropping your video, Molly. You're fading in and out.
Oh, I apologize. Let me do that. Okay, hopefully that helps. I'll try to speak closer to the
it will help. No, that's not the problem. It's bandwidth is the problem.
Okay. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yesterday, Marin County decided they were no longer needing to require fully vaccinated individuals to wear masks indoors as of yesterday, though they still strongly encourage everyone to wear masks indoors at private gatherings where vaccination status could not be confirmed. And per OSHA, Cal OSHA, and our internal policy, staff and vendors who are not fully vaccinated must continue to wear face coverings indoors. So all of this is, as I said, shifting quickly. So where does that leave us? Well, as I said, tonight we have a resolution to continue virtual meetings, but I think also we want to start to consider the move and transition back to in-person meetings and what the options are in front of the board. So in summary, there are three options, though there are variations, I think, within each option, but for simplicity, I'm just going to talk about three options. One is continue virtual meetings. We have to adhere to AB 361, including the 30 days requirement for making findings and adopting a resolution to continue virtual meetings based on health risks. Everyone would participate virtually. Option two is a hybrid meeting. Like I said, there are some variations on this, but this would look like all directors and key staff being physically present in the boardroom and the dais. There is the question of masks being required for all, or alternatively only for unvaccinated attendees, consistent with some of the current health directive. We would look at social distancing, and an analysis has shown that there could be 12 seats available for public in-person attendees. And we would also have the option for public participants to continue to attend virtually. The third option is fully in-person meetings. This is very much going back to what I would call pre-COVID conditions. Everyone is attending in person. The only variation might be a masking requirement, whether for all attendees or only unvaccinated attendees is still a question. And we could continue to live stream the meetings, but this would not include virtual public attendance. So with that, we can go back to our recommendation slide if you'd like. And I'd be interested in hearing some thoughts, comments, or questions from the board.
Great, thanks, Molly. That was a terrific presentation. Let's start first with board comment, and then we'll go to public comment on this before we take action. I don't think do people feel like they still need the slide to be up? It might be easier to have a conversation if we stop screen share, yeah. Okay, board comment on the recommendation or on the presentation generally.
Yes, I would simply say this is that I feel like this the pandemic has whiplashed us back and forth. I'd love to get back together in person as soon as we can safely, but I also feel like every time I've gotten closer to thinking that it's going to be that time where we can all get back together safely, there's been a shift in what's happening with COVID. So I want to be extra cautious for the staff and for the board and for the public, part of me has sort of thinks of a cautionary principle here is to maybe wait and see what's going to happen as we get into winter. So I just would advocate that we choose a path that is overly protective, if that's maybe the way to put it, and we can see sort of how things play out as we get into the winter season.
Okay, so that sounds like you're advocating for the resolution as the staff has put it forward, which is to continue to allow virtual meetings pursuant to AB 361.
Yeah.
Okay. Other board comments on this item?
I tend to agree.
Okay.
Just for clarity, we would need to have another item come back on November 16th. And I'm hearing that erring on the side of caution, that might look very much like the resolution that we have in front of the board for action tonight. That would be another 30-day period that would allow continuation of virtual meetings. Unless I'm hearing there's an interest in trying to do something different. And I understand things do change quickly in one direction or another.
Yeah, I mean, your proposal is to continue virtual meetings. I think I'm inclined that way myself. I think it's actually been, aside from the obvious health, the health and safety issues, I think it actually has been beneficial from a public participation perspective. We've heard from a lot of people that have not participated before. It's, made it easier, particularly for, older folks or who have, mobilization issues. So there's that separate set of considerations, but I think the paramount issue does need to be health and safety. So I'm not sure I completely understand your point, Molly. You've brought a resolution forward. I'm hearing the board is inclined, and you're saying we need to do. I mean, I don't want to get boxed up in the. If I could just finish my sentence, I don't want to get boxed up in the the technical what's going to happen at the next meeting. I'm just trying to get through tonight. It's already 9:30, so we have a resolution before us. That's what we're going to be voting on, right?
Understood.
Okay.
Well, what if I could?
Okay.
We just wanted to hear from the board if, in fact, for the next board meeting, you were interested to set a date going back to in-person or hybrid.
Yeah, I think we
But
understand. and
that would
I'm not
only be
hearing
that 30-day window
Yeah.
from November 16th through December. And what I'm hearing is maybe we think about the start of the year and see how things go before we make a move like that.
Yeah.
I think so.
That's what I'm hearing as well. Thank you. I think President Kohler was clear and
Yeah,
understanding of where the board is.
right. Right. I thought so too, but you know, it's always so fun to have other people reframe what you've just said. Are there, is there any public comment on this item?
Yes, there are three.
Okay.
Rick Adler, Larry Minnekes, and Laura Ethel. So Mr. Adler?
Yes, I thank you. Yes, I would. One of the few blessings of the pandemic has been these virtual meetings. I think they're wonderful. I think it's a much improvement over getting together physically. I think that it would take much longer for these meetings if we did get together physically or a hybrid. And, you know, you have to put on your go-to-meeting clothes, close down your house, drive over, open up the place, and then got to do it all in reverse, take much longer. And you can, from my point of view, I can hear what's being presented much better. I can see the charts much better. I think it's much better to do these virtual meetings. And I hope you can continue to do that. If need be, to satisfy the Brown Act, that everybody can participate. If there's somebody that cannot attend the virtual meetings virtually, you can arrange to have them come to the meeting room and then have somebody there to show them, to set them up to be virtual. If they can't afford it or don't have the equipment or don't know how to get online virtually. I think if you did that by appointment, you probably wouldn't hardly ever get anybody to take you up on it, but that would satisfy the Brown Act that it is open to everybody. So anyway, I hope you can continue to do the virtual meetings. I think they're a blessing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Minnekes, please.
Good evening. You might consider being more conservative and waiting till March for two reasons. One is it's going to be flu season, and they're predicting it could be a very nasty flu season. So you may not want to bring people back together for that reason, but also because we've seen now this ping pong effect happen, particularly in the winter, where one center suddenly breaks out and then another. California was at the top and then the bottom, and it just might be more conservative to await a decision to do something else like hybrid till March. And that's all I wanted to say. Good night.
Thank you. And Ms. Ethel, please.
Thank you. I'm glad you've decided to continue with these remote meetings. I appreciate that because I like having remote meetings. But I'd like to point out that something has changed in the last 2 years. And that is, there's a whole new category of people who are disabled. And I'm among them. And those are the immune compromised. And Ms. McLean's chart of having in-person meetings does not permit people who can't come to the meetings to participate fully in those meetings. I believe this would be a violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act and with a state law called the Unruh Civil Rights Act. There's nothing for you to do about it right now, but as you continue along this line and consider how to hold your upcoming meetings, I hope you will continue to permit those of us who are immune compromised to participate fully in your meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further public comments.
I'm sorry, you said there's no further public comments?
There are no more.
Okay, then I'm looking for a motion on this resolution.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Vice President Russell,
Aye.
and President Kohler.
Aye. Okay, we're on to item 8, which is a request to fill a meter reader position, also a repair worker.
Yes, President Kohler and directors, these are mine, and pretty straightforward. We did have a meter reader and repair worker that departed the agency, and we would like to recruit and hire that person. It is a budgeted position. And the same we can say with the account clerk position. That was one of our accounts payable people that's taken a promotional opportunity with another agency. And again, we would like authorization to recruit and hire that position.
Okay, so Chuck, you're wanting to do items 9 and 10 together. I assume, Molly, we need 2 separate votes, the way these are agendized.
I'm sorry, I wasn't able to unmute quickly. Unless there's an objection from one of the board members, we can do them as one item, or if there's a concern, we can do them as 2 votes.
Okay, so let's first see if there's any board item on either item 9 or 10.
No.
Doesn't look like it. Okay, do we have public comment on either item 9 or 10?
There are none.
Okay, does any board member object to our moving items 9 and 10 together?
No.
Seeing none, I need a motion.
So
Approval.
moved. Second.
Second.
All right, Terry.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Gibson.
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Vice President Russell.
Aye.
And President Kohler.
Aye. Future agenda items and future meeting schedule.
Thank you. Our next Finance and Administration Committee meeting is actually Friday, November 12th. Because of Thanksgiving, we had to schedule it to Friday. So that's when we'll have our meeting. Thereafter, the following week, we'll have our last 3 meetings for November, which are the next board meeting, which is on November 16th, the Communications and Water Efficiency Committee meeting on the 17th, and the Operations Committee on the 19th. Are there any questions?
Any board comments on this item? We're so close to ending this meeting on time. Any public comment on this item?
There are no comments on this item.
All right, 8 minutes over. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Bye.